explain a little bit about how this works. One of the reasons why we're not seeing a lot of response rates is because our prospects are distracted. There's lots of things that are happening. They're getting too many emails. They have too many things on their table. And so what we want to do is we want to be able to break that cycle and be able to draw their attention. So if we were trying to address something with the clients and we were to say, if we were to choose between two different email templates, one which said why I chose XYZ provider versus why I stopped using XYZ provider, the latter would be much more effective in terms of getting responses and getting open rates. And so it's because of that negative effect, people are interested in finding out why you didn't choose a particular provider rather than why you chose provider. And it's the same thing in the news. You'll notice that most of the time the news is negative, and that's the items that get the most attention. And so it's the same thing with our email campaigns. If we were focusing on positive versus negative types of templates, the negative ones are always going to outperform any types of positive types of content. So a few examples of things that we could talk about in these email campaigns. We could talk about why I don't like a particular provider. What is it that you don't like about them? Or 10 things I hate about. So you could talk about a list of items. Or you could talk about the challenges that you experience with different providers. Or you could just simply list who are the 10 worst providers in a particular market. Who are the most expensive providers? Or why did I switch from this provider? Why did I stop using them? All of these topics would be more interesting to your prospects than the reverse of them. So this is something that we're trying to avoid pain as human beings more than we're trying to gain pleasure. And so in this sense, people are more worried about choosing the wrong provider rather than choosing the right provider. And so in this sense, this is why we're going to get a better traction rate focusing on negative topics than positive ones. Now, you're probably wondering, well, how do I get this data? It needs to be unbiased. It needs to be data-driven. So there's a number of ways that we can actually do this. But first of all, let's talk a little bit about sideways sales letters. We've talked about this in the past. But if you're not familiar with it, one of the greatest sales techniques that you can offer your clients or to employ as a company is what we call a sideways sales letter, which is an excuse to stay in front of your prospects on a regular basis, something that gives you the ability to not only show up in their inbox on a regular basis, but also to earn their attention. And so if you were to create a cadence of listings related to the 10 worst providers or the top 10 challenges, anything that allows you to email and stay in contact and ultimately maintain mind share over a long period of time, that increases your chances of winning deals because timing is something that's going to happen not necessarily in the very instance that you're going to send that email. But if you stay in front of the clients using a sideways sales letter, you're able to maintain that mind share and be in front of them all the time and make sure that you're there when the timing is right. And so the sideways sales letter is essentially providing the opportunity to slowly share your message over time. So in this sense, if you're ranking the top worst providers for hosted voice, for instance, that would be something where the client could recognize that you're an authority. You understand what's working, what's not working. And when it comes time to make a switch, or if they're not happy with their existing provider, or if their existing provider is on your list, they're going to want to know why or who is the best provider to turn to. And so it's just knowing who not to turn to is going to help them recognize you as a place to identify who to turn to. I've talked a lot about surveys in the past, but this is a great way to gather unbiased data. Another great excuse to stay in contact with clients and also share the results on a regular basis via sideways sales letters. You can also turn to places like Google, Yelp. Another great resource is just simply looking at doing personal opinion interviews. So if somebody's responded to a survey, or if you just want to interview people, you can do more case study style responses and talk to them what they like, what they don't like, what their experience has been like, and simply create case studies But then as you do the case studies, you can pull out the ones that highlight the negative aspects of a specific vendor. And this will help you to help create what the content that helps people avoid pain. You can also find a lot of great information on Google reviews, where people are actually doing write-ups about what they like and what they don't like, and include that in your content. Another great way to do this is based off of price ranking. Now, a lot of carriers or a lot of suppliers or vendors don't want you to put their pricing out there, but you can still gather the pricing and then simply rank them based off of who's the most expensive to who's the least expensive. You could also run some analytics versus pricing versus customer reviews and see if there's a correlation. If you can go to places like downdetector.com and check the number of outages, the depth of the outages, the length of the average outage time frame. Also, if you're employing an opinions-based sales strategy, where it's basically rather than offering products, you're simply asking their opinion about things in order to create conversations. And the subject matter of those conversations could be about who would you recommend, which ultimately translates into a net promoter score. And so again, these are all unbiased, just standard data pieces. But if you start gathering that information, you could rank companies based off of their net promoter score, but if you're doing a negative sales campaign like what we're talking about today, you would just start from the bottom and do the lowest one first and then go down from there. Also, there's a great tool at listanalytics.org which can look at commonalities that exist inside of lists. So for instance, it looks at public data records like DNS or website plugins and tries to determine which companies are using what. And so basically, companies are voting based off of what they're using. So if everybody's using Office 365, for instance, then that's the fact that they use it is how they vote within that platform. And so it's a way to just look at raw public data about usage of different products and services among a group of companies. So you can upload a list of companies here and say, tell me what these companies have in common. So you can look at all the different companies in Seattle, for instance, and say, look, here's how companies rank based off of usage. So this is just, again, raw data. We always want to be unbiased here, because if you're going to start speaking negatively about companies, the vendors who you're speaking negatively are going to get upset. And so you want to make sure that you're using actual unbiased data. In addition, it would be helpful to combine some of these data points. And so just ranking things based off of pricing alone, again, it's not going to get you very far. It may be helpful, but it may be even more valuable to the client to help combine different data points and create an overall score that would then provide additional angles and a more rounded approach to what you're trying to do here. There's a lot of different companies that already do this today. It doesn't mean that the marketplace for opinion-based sales is saturated, but this is just an example of a company that put together a ranking based off of customer reviews for different providers in the data center space. And so you can kind of see here they're ranking the number of reviews, the overall review. But this is what something like this could look like. And again, if we're doing a sideways sales letter, you could talk about the changes that are taking place over time, and then maybe add other elements, and then provide some case studies on top of that. And this is something that would be valuable to a lot of clients if you were to send this out. Because again, the information is available on the web, and a lot of your clients are shopping on the web. But having to do the legwork and the homework to combine the information into an easy-to-read report adds a lot of value, which also helps you become the expert and they know to turn to you, because you have this enclave of information that's not available, at least not very easily, through the web. Now again, the website for data analytics, you can go to listanalytics.org. This is an example of what it looks like. So if you were to drop in a list of companies that can tell you what they have in common, in this case, it kind of breaks down the different data centers or DNS solutions or phone carriers. But it's a great tool to kind of provide information. And so in this sense, you can see that it's Azure, Amazon, and Rackspace. But if you were doing a negative sales campaign, you would just reverse it and do Rackspace first, and then Amazon and Azure, and basically list these are the providers that we're seeing in this area, but these are the ones that are used the least versus the ones that are most popular. Also, if you need contacts, always please feel free to go to upsellreport.com or Ensable.com/data for bulk lists. And you can use that in some of your campaigns. So if you're doing an opinion-based sales campaign, which is probably your best place to start with this, basically you would say, look, who would you recommend for a data center solution or for hosted voice or for IT security or managed IT? From there you would be able to get the Net Promoter Score, and then you could reply back and say, look, this is what everybody else found. This is what everybody else recommended. Based on, you recommended this company, but this is what a majority of the companies recommended. This is the company that was least recommended among all the different vendors. So if I was doing an email campaign, you could say something like this: subject, worst VoIP providers. So obviously, as we talked about in the beginning, our prospects are distracted, so we need to be able to address that by providing something that will actually catch their attention, which is the whole purpose of this campaign, is to provide something. If I was to provide a list of the best VoIP providers, it would be less interesting to our prospects. But in this case, using the word worst and then basically just reversing the list, we now have content that will get a better response, or at least a better open rate. So the email content could look something like this. Again, this is just an example, but you could say, I thought you might appreciate a heads up on what's happening in the voice industry in case you need to switch providers in the future. I've surveyed companies here locally to see what their opinion is about VoIP providers. Here are the companies with the lowest ranking. So hopefully one of the providers on the list is their provider, and it's going to say, well, why am I using one of the worst providers? And you can pull different lists through Ensable.com to determine which companies are using the lowest ranked providers. And that may be a good angle to lead with as far as targeting companies that are using some of the lowest ranked providers. And that's it for today. Hopefully that made sense. But again, just to summarize, the negative sales campaigns get better response rates because people are more interested in avoiding pain than gaining pleasure. It's just hardwired into our brains. And so helping companies understand what to avoid, but also providing unbiased data, just saying, look,